Hashem descended, and a cloud stood with him there, Moses. He called out with the name Hashem. Hashem passed before him, proclaimed, Hashem, Hashem, God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abundant in kindness and truth, preserver of kindness for 1,000 generations, forgiver of iniquity, willful sin and error, who cleanses, but does not cleanse completely, recalling the iniquity of parents upon children and grandchildren to the third and fourth generations. And here, the modern reader is very upset. Children, grandchildren have to pay for the sins of their ancestors. It's unjust, it's unfair, it's primitive, it's superstitious, and if he's loaded on anthropology, he has another 10 adjectives he can add to the fire. Now, I'm using this as an example of how you can read something superficially in two senses. First of all, you don't pay attention to what's written carefully. And number two, you don't have enough information about the book as a whole. And when you commit those two errors, then you indeed can work yourself into a tizzy. But if you correct those two errors, then I think the problems go away. We're on page 509, verse 5. So first of all, let's try to understand what's written here. In particular, verse 7. These are God's attributes of mercy, except for the end. Preserver of kindness for thousands of generations. What could that mean? Preserver of kindness for thousands of generations. Well, one way to understand it, and it definitely fits the words, is that if you have a generation that is good and earns God's kindness, the kindness applies not only to them, but to the future, up to thousands of generations, which should be at least 2,000. Okay, now let's keep going. At the end, and does not cleanse completely, recalling the iniquity of parents upon children and grandchildren to the third and fourth generations. Now let's try to work this out with logic. Let's suppose generation 1 is outstandingly good. So the verse says they earned God's kindness, but it's not just for that generation. That kindness that's earned applies for 2,000 generations. Okay. Now, generation 2 is bad. Terribly bad. Iniquity. What's going to happen to generation 3? What's going to happen to generation 3? Well, preserving the kindness of generation 1 means generation 3 ought to get kindness. Visiting the iniquity of the parents upon the children ought to mean that generation 3 gets iniquity. So it gets kindness and iniquity. I know, Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, kindness. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, iniquity. Shabbos, take a rest. I mean, something funny is going on here. Just try to make sense out of what's written. I'm stressing this because it's something which is rarely ever tried. People read, and then their minds explode with all sorts of prejudices, and then they go and order a cheeseburger. But something funny is going on here. On the surface, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, as a matter of fact, this phrase, recalling iniquity of parents, children, grandchildren, occurs 4 times in the Torah. So the first thing one might have thought of is, let's look up other places where it occurs and see if we can get any help. Now go back to 409. You shall not prostrate yourself to them, or worship them. Hashem, your God, a jealous God, whatever that means, I'm not going to go into that, who visits the sin of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations for my enemies. It's not willy-nilly. It's not that if generation 1 worships idols, then 2, 3, and 4 get sin automatically. No, it's only if generations 2, 3, and 4 qualify as God's enemies. Only then is the sin of generation 1 visited upon them. and who shows kindness for thousands of generations to those who love me and observe my commandments. That also is not willy-nilly. The kindness that's stored up from a good generation doesn't go to every subsequent generation down to 2,000. It depends upon whether they themselves love God and observe his commandments. So first of all, we've solved the problem about generation 3. Generation 3 will get according to its own record. If they themselves qualify as God's enemies, then they will get sin from generation 1. If they themselves qualify as those who love God and perform his commandments, they will get kindness from generation 1, generation 2. Right? It depends on what your own record is. So there's no contradiction back in 509. And it doesn't now sound as morally obtuse as it sounded before. What you get depends upon your own record. Furthermore, there's an obvious bias here. What's the obvious bias? Kindness is preserved for 2,000 generations. Sin and iniquity are preserved for 4. That's a very lopsided bias on the side of kindness. As the Talmud remarks, it's a ratio of 500 to 1. So if anything, there's a gigantic bias on the side of kindness here as against preserving iniquity. This very, very greatly softens the text, and it very, very greatly reduces the kind of moral outrage that you typically hear from people who read 509 alone. Still, it doesn't completely solve the problem. Why should anything that happens to me depend upon my ancestors when it's bad? When it's good, all bets are off. There's no moral complaint that God will give to someone something he didn't deserve. Generosity, kindness, where you get something you didn't deserve, is a positive moral trait. No one's going to complain against God, well, they didn't earn your kindness, so it's not right to give it to them. No one's going to raise that complaint. That's silly. But why should it be in the case of sin and iniquity that if generation 1 is sinful and generations 2, 3, and 4 continue the sin, that they should in part be burdened with a punishment for generation 1? Why shouldn't each generation in terms of punishment be judged on its own? That's the remaining question. And there are a number of answers to that question. One is that routinely reincarnation occurs for 4 generations. And if you take reincarnation into account, it means that the people in generations 2, 3, and 4 are reincarnations of generation 1, so they're the same people another time around. So it isn't because of what your ancestors did, it's because of what you did. That's one way out. Another way out is this. The first generation that deteriorates may not be fully aware of the consequences of so doing. They may not realize the terrible crimes that they're committing because they don't have personal experience of it. But generation 2, which sees generation 1, sees what they're doing and observes the consequences, if they continue the same path, they're more guilty. They're more guilty because they're continuing a path which is already on record. And they should have known better. So that being the case, it could be that generations 2, 3, and 4 get taxed with some responsibility because of a generation 1, because since there was a generation before them, their crime is more severe. In any case, I think you can see that once you add 409 to 509 and add a little logic, the problems that seem to arise in 509 are not genuine problems. Okay? Remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. 6 days shall you work and accomplish all your work. 7th day is the Sabbath to Hashem, your God. You shall not do any work. Work, work, work. You would be forgiven if you thought that in the Hebrew it was the same word 3 times, but it isn't. It isn't. There are 2 words in Hebrew in this passage. One is avodah. Avodah means work, sweat, aching muscles, need for relaxation. The other word is malacha. Malacha carries no such association. Not of getting tired, not of straining. Malacha means some kind of creative performance, but it might be stitching a garment, or as we'll see, as I'll describe it to you in a moment. So first of all, I have to ask, what does the text say? Well, the text says, 6 days shall you avodah, work, sweat, muscles, and accomplish all your malacha, all the creative tasks that you have in front of you. And the seventh day is a Shabbat to Hashem, your God. You shall not do any malacha. Shall not do any malacha. Not avodah, but malacha. Why is this important? Because there's a scenario that played itself out in the United States maybe tens of thousands of times, from the 1880s through the 1930s, 40s, where there was a massive immigration from Europe to the United States of Jews, and they very quickly assimilated, and the Jew says to his local rabbi, "Gee, Rabbi, I know that on the seventh day we're supposed to rest, but surely, Rabbi, they can't mean not to strike matches. Striking matches doesn't work. It's not hard. I don't sweat. My muscles don't ache. Surely that's not work. So, Rabbi, when the Bible says don't do work, can't mean not to light night fires with matches." And now, what I just told you about the different Hebrew words becomes very important. If the Torah said don't do avodah, they'd be right. Striking a match is not avodah. But the Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says don't do malacha. What is malacha? A rough description of malacha is this. Malacha is something that you do intentionally, don't do it by accident, skillfully, it's creative, and it's physical. It's some kind of physical change. Intentional, skillful, creative, physical change. Now let's try out striking matches. When you strike matches, do you do it intentionally? Yeah, you don't do it by accident when you're not paying attention. And it's skillful. Children do need some time to experiment before they ignite fires. And I don't know if they've ever yet been able to train a chimpanzee to strike a match. And it's creative. It creates heat and light, fire. And it's a physical change. It's definitely a malacha. It's not even questionable that it's a malacha. So when the Torah says don't do malacha, it clearly includes not striking matches. But the poor English reader doesn't get that. Because he reads work, work, work. And he knows what work is. And there's no way in English that striking a match could be work. So I sympathize with the English reader. But it isn't an objection against the original text, which of course is the Hebrew text. Are we together so far? Okay, now, does anybody... Yeah.
So, but it doesn't say, it just says 6 days you should do avodah, but the seventh day you should not do any malacha, but it doesn't explicitly say don't do avodah.
That's correct. That is correct. And indeed, as far as the biblical text is concerned, if a person will spend Shabbos lifting barbells, it will not be a biblical prohibition. It will not be a biblical prohibition. That's not what's prohibited.
Well, what if you get paid for avodah?
Even being paid is only rabbinic.
Really?
It's only rabbinic, that's right. It's not one of the 39 forbidden categories of malacha. The reason why you can't get something be paid, because being paid for a job usually involves writing.
Yeah.
Writing down the records, signing that you received your payment or whatever it is, and the writing is a biblical malacha. So the working for money is because of the possibility of writing. It's not a biblical.
You can't get paid on Shabbos, but you can be making money on Shabbos, you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is to do a job on Shabbos, just on Shabbos, for the sake of money, is forbidden by the rabbis. If you work for a whole week and one of them is included, one of the days that's included in Shabbos, that's okay. It was only if you're going to be paid specifically for only what you do on Shabbos. But if you get paid on Friday, on Sunday, it wouldn't matter. Because normal payment involves writing, and who knows when it's going to happen. Too detailed to be observed correctly.
So if you work Saturday and Sunday, and you got paid on that Sunday?
And you get paid for the 2 days.
You paid for the 2 days on Sunday?
That's fine. So people work as waiters in hotels on Shabbos. And they're paid for that.
Rabbis work.
Yes, quite right. Rabbis do work on Shabbos. As they said to the conservative rabbi, "Rabbi, we understand why we can drive to the synagogue on Shabbos because we're not going to work. We're driving to the synagogue to pray. But you, Rabbi, you're driving to work, so you can't drive. You should walk. That didn't carry much weight. It was too logical. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a connection between Malachah and Malachim?
Yes, there is a connection between Malacha and Malachim. Very good. And the correct translation of Malachim is agent. Agent. We translate angel. Angel, of course, means nothing. I guess it's a Greek word or something. But instead of, and sometimes they translate malach as messenger. That's completely wrong. Malachim do lots of other things besides carry messengers. And by the way, the word malach applies to people also. It has nothing to do with angels particularly. That's why when I read malach Hashem, I always translate it as agent of Hashem. And then you can have a malachim of a king. The king can send people as his agents to do something for him. Right? That's why malach is agent, because it's a word for doing something, for a performance. Very good. Okay, so now I want to ask you something else. Shabbos. Shabbos is the word here, Sabbath. Does the word Shabbos have a meaning in the Hebrew language?
7.
Okay, how about 7? Nope, that's not right.
Shabbat doesn't mean rest.
Nope, it does not mean rest.
Shabbat, sit.
Nope, sit. Nope, does not. These are all the common suggestions. Nope, it doesn't mean any of those.
7th day of the week.
Nope. The word, I'm not what it refers to now. Talk about its meaning.
Separation.
No, doesn't mean separation. Doesn't mean to return. Right? Shav means to return. No, Shabbat does not mean to return. Shabbat means to cease, to stop doing something. It means to stop doing something. In modern Hebrew, a strike, when the workers call a strike, is called a shvita, which carries the assumption that before that time they were working, which might not always be true. But okay, that's the idea. Shvita is a cessation. The word Shabbos means cessation.
Would rest
No, it does not mean to rest. In fact, in the creation story, it says about the guy Shavas, Vayinofash. Shavas means he ceased creating. Vayinofash means roughly he recovered. Rested, recovered, that sort of thing. But it does not mean to rest. Lishbos does not mean to rest. It means to stop doing something. Now do you understand why Shabbos has to be at the end of the week?
Yeah.
Could you imagine Shabbos being at the beginning of the week? How can you start a week by stopping? What are you stopping? Now can you understand why there's some question about the Christian calendar? What's the first day of the week in the Christian calendar?
Monday.
No, it isn't.
Sunday.
You can, in the app on your phone, there's usually an instruction where you can choose the first day of the week if you want to start the week with a business week. But all default calendars start with Sunday. Yeah.
But technically, if you put Shabbos anywhere in the week, it's gonna be the end of the week because naturally it's Sabbath. So wherever you put it, that's a stop.
Yeah, but that's not true. It's not true. You can make that up if you like, but it isn't true. And I asked Asher Wade, who was an absolutely wonderful person, scholar. He was a Methodist minister, and he went to Germany to get his doctorate in Methodist theology, and he met some Ger Hasidim, and that was that. And he became a Ger Tzedek, and he's a Ger Chassid, as a matter of fact, and he lives here in Yerushalayim, and he's a psychotherapist, and he's a wonderful, wonderful person. He explained to me that when Christianity started out, they had 2 holy days a week. One day was Shabbos, which is Saturday, of course, and Sunday because, according to their tradition, the founder of Christianity was resurrected on Sunday. When Constantine made the Roman Empire Christian, he said to the Christian elders, okay, we're going to all become Christian. By the way, he didn't. He remained a pagan. This was to unify the empire because there were too many different fighting subgroups. But he said, you're not getting 2 days a week. Pick one. So they picked Sunday because it was distinctive of Christianity. And they moved Shabbos to Sunday. They just moved it. I think that gives you a good indication of how Christianity works, how its decisions are made, how what its foundations are. But that's why, to this very day, Christian calendars start with Sunday. The default calendars in the Western world start with Sunday. because that's the first day of the week from time immemorial. And Shabbos for them, the biblical Sabbath is on Sunday, even though it's the first day of the week, because they just moved it, that's all. At any rate, you understand why it's got to be the end of the week, because the very name Shabbos means cessation, and it carries the implication of ceasing from what you did before. I'll just give you one more little implication. Suppose the person says this: Shabbos is the holiest day of the year. It comes once a week. It's the foundation of Jewish existence. It's here in the 10 pronouncements of Sinai. Now, other people need to work. I understand that. But I happen to be very wealthy, you know. I am where Bill Gates was before he started giving money away. And I'm just going to make my whole life Shabbos. Right? That's wrong. That's wrong. The creator of the universe set up the parameters. And he said, 1/7 of your time, Shabbos, is the right proportion. And that's why the Torah introduces it with 7 days shall you work, not because there's a mitzvah to work. No one can claim that he goes to Wall Street because the Torah says he has to work. That's not true. But Shabbos has to be in contrast to what comes before it. So that those days have to be work days. You might not have to work, but you can't declare them as Shabbos days. Shabbos has to stand in contrast to what came before it. Those are days which are work days that you might choose not to work, but you can't sanctify them. You can't elevate them. They can't be Shabbostic. They can't have Shabbos, the Shabbos identity. Okay, now let's go on. It says the seventh day, Shabbos Hashem your God, shall not do any malacha. Now comes a list, and we are going to spend some time on this list. You, your son, your daughter, your male slave, your female slave, your animal, and your convert within your gates. You, your son, your daughter, your male slave, female slave, your animal, and your convert within your gates. Does that list raise some questions in your mind? Some things that would appreciate to have clarified, to understand it, what it's getting at, some things which may appear to be perhaps even questionable, something that would be worthy of objection.
How do we force non-Jews to observe Shabbos?
Where do you go to the non-Jews here?
So the slaves and the maidservants are all Jews.
Oh, I see. Even if they're non-Jews, I see what you mean.
Certainly the animals aren't Jewish.
Okay, but the animal you could ask better, right? Animals aren't even human. Is keeping Shabbos applied to animals?
Is it them keeping?
Before you suggest answers, let's just get the questions on the table. So, the reference to animal here has to be explained. It's very funny.
For you.
Okay, but I said before we suggest answers, let's get the questions on the table, right? Yeah, that's right. What else is bothersome here? Yeah.
Where's your wife?
How about the wife? Wow, the wife is missing. Oh man, what are we going to do with that? It's a good question, but maybe in a few minutes you'll regret it. Maybe you'll regret it. Okay, what else? How about the order, boys and girls? Do you really want to put
Animal before convert.
the animal before the convert? Do you really want to do that? That just doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right. Well, I know, that's brutal.
Convert should be first.
Of course. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you a Rashi, and on the basis of that Rashi, I want you to figure out the answers to the questions we raised. Rashi says, when it says you, your son and daughter, is referring to minor children. Sons before the 13th birthday and daughters before the 12th birthday. That's what it's referring to. So taking Rashi in hand, I want you to fill in the following phrase. This is a list of you and what?
Oh, your
Your possessions.
Possessions won't work for the convert.
Your
People
household.
around Chayav.
People for whom you're responsible.
Oh, that's the key word.
Oh, that's-
You and those for whom you are responsible. Those you have responsible for. I'll come to the convert, right? We'll have to explain that bit. Starts with your children. You have primary responsibility for your children. Then your slaves. You have responsibility for them. Then your animal, for whom you have responsibility because it's your possession. And then, as you will see, there's some responsibility for converts as well. But of course, the convert is another adult human being, and he's independent, so you have responsibilities to him, but far less responsibility than you have even to your own animal, which is your possession. It's directly responsible for. Okay? Now, let's come back to his question. Think carefully and try to answer this in the most correct way. What then is the answer to the question why your wife is missing?
He's talking to her too.
Responsible to him.
Meaning, say it out, meaning,
Meaning
again,
he's
I'm,
responsible for these.
think of my question. What was my question? My question was, why is she missing from the list? What's the answer?
She's not.
She's not missing from the list.
She's the you.
The you includes all adult Jews. Why did you think the woman was missing? Hey, a little misogynist leftovers there? Don't associate it with us. The neutral you in Hebrew refers to men and women equally, unless something in the context distinguishes it. That's what Rashi is implying by saying that the son and daughter are minors. But every adult Jew has an equal responsibility for Shabbos. The woman has the exact same responsibility as a man, whether she's married or not married. There's no difference between them whatsoever.
If the woman was reading it, she would have thought, where does it say your husband?
Probably not, because most women are sure that the text is misogynist. They don't have to be, they don't need any propaganda. They're expecting that it's for men and not for women. But at any rate, either way, you certainly would be in trouble. Now, let's go back to animal. What's the animal doing there? An animal does not have to keep Shabbos. For example, detaching something that grows from its source of growth is a biblical prohibition. Must my animal not graze on Shabbos? Must I pre-cut all of its food so that it doesn't have to bite the grass and cut it off from its source of nourishment? Certainly not. The prohibition here is that the animal shouldn't do anything for you. My wife and I were here in 1967, right after the war. One of the things we did, we took a trip to the Golan Heights, which in those days was Syria, and we saw people, farmers, threshing wheat the way it describes it in the Mishnah from 1900 years ago. You have a pile of wheat on the ground, you have a pole in the center, you have an animal with a rope around its neck, and the other end of the rope is tied in a loop around the pole, and the animal walks round and round and steps on the grain to thresh the grain. That's how they were threshing the grain. Mishnah come to life, 1900 years later, right? That animal is doing work for you. Threshing grain is something which is forbidden for Jews to do on Shabbos, and you can't have the animal do it for you either. That's a prohibition against, about the mention of the word animal here. Not that it should itself perform one of the 39 categories, it's irrelevant, it's an animal. Now, when it comes to convert, there's a split, because the word that's translated in English as convert, ger in Hebrew, has two meanings, two applications. One is a person who converts to Judaism as a full-fledged Jew. The other is a person, the word ger, gar in Hebrew, means to dwell in a place, but not necessarily to be a full-fledged citizen. Not necessarily. Could be, but could not be. There are other words which indicate full-fledged citizenship, like ezrach, or yashav. Yashav in a place usually indicates full-fledged citizenship. But ger does not. Could be either way. And the other meaning of ger is what's called a ger toshav. A ger toshav is a person who's not Jewish, who pledges allegiance to the Torah's laws for non-Jews, gives up idol worship, and he pledges allegiance to keep the Torah's laws for non-Jews, but does not convert to Judaism. And he's perfectly welcome. He's welcome to live among us and to retain his non-Jewish status. And he then comes under the same prohibition as the animal. So it's July 16th, and there's a drought, and I'm on my way out to shul, And because of the drought, my petunias in my front yard are wilting and withering. And my non-Jewish neighbor, Ger Toshav, is out there watering his petunias. He says, oh, my dear Jewish neighbor, your petunias are wilting. I know you can't water them on Shabbos, but how about me just sprinkling them with my hose? I'll be happy to do that for you. So I have to tell him, no. No, I can't accept him to do for me something which is forbidden for me. Now there are parameters and ups and downs, and there are ice and all sorts of other, but that's the general idea. So that is why if the ger here is a ger toshav, then we understand what he's doing on the list. What about a ger tzedek? Someone who is a complete convert to Judaism. Here the Ramban expresses a very, I think, very important and not very well-known idea. A convert is responsible for all 613 commandments. He's a full-fledged Jew. Still, certain commandments that Jews have towards each other, the Torah goes out of its way to double them with respect to a convert. So, for example, you have V'ahavta Chamocha, which is a command to love all Jews, certain qualifications, but all Jews. There's another verse, V'ahavta Sager, that you should love the convert. But he's already included in the first, says the Ramban. Yes, that's right. He's included in the first, but for a convert, you double it up. Because we want you to pay special attention to a convert. You want to give a convert special care because of what he's sacrificed to become a Jew, cut himself off. So it's doubled up. You shouldn't cause pain to another Jew with your words, and lo sono saker, don't cause pain to a convert with your words. The first one includes the convert, but for a convert it's doubled, because the Torah wants you to have special concern for a convert. So here, when you're talking about a person who converts, we're talking about his responsibility to keep Shabbos. When a person is in the process of conversion, he's allowed, not only allowed, but at a certain late stage, he's encouraged, required to go through all the commandments. I knew a fellow who became a ger tzedek in Boston many years ago when I was there. And he came to shul and he wore tzitzis and he davened and he made kiddush Friday night and kept kosher and everything except Shabbos. A non-Jew is not allowed to keep Shabbos. He must violate every Shabbos at least once. So when he becomes a full-fledged ger, full-fledged convert, it's the first time he's going to be responsible to keep Shabbos. The Torah says, have special concern for the Shabbos of a ger. And that's what it's doing there, if you take it to mean. And it isn't as if it's one's right, one's wrong. The commentators, some commentators take one way the other way, but both are correct. That it includes both the ger toshav and ger tzedek. So that's the reason for the list. Now, it says, don't do malacha. Why not? 11. 4. In 6 days, Hashem made the heavens and the earth, the sea, all in them, and he, I think this is correct here, yes, he rested, that's not lishbos, it's vayanach, on the 7th day. Therefore Hashem blessed the Sabbath day and sanctified it. You shouldn't do any malacha on Shabbos because God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and the 7th he rested. I'll explain rested in a minute. I would suggest to you that the because here is not obvious. It's not obvious at all. The infinite creator of the universe did PQR. Therefore, I should do PQR? That's not obvious at all. If we had a principle of Judaism, whatever God does, don't do because you're not God, we'd all nod our heads and say, oh, of course, obviously. I mean, he's God. You can't do that. You're just a finite creature. Half of you is physical. Of course you can't do what God does. We'd all nod our heads and say, of course. So then we should stop and think, what? Because God did it, we should do something analogous? Why should we do that? And then you may recall the verse in Genesis that says we are made b'tselem Elokim. We are made sharing some qualities of God's. And then we may be able to understand that this is possible. This is the first place that, as far as I know, where the Torah says explicitly that you should do what he does. We have it as one of the 613 commandments. We are bound to develop God-like character traits. Mahu afata, just as he is, so shall you be. But that's not obvious. And here's the first place where the Torah is expressing this. Because he did it, therefore you do it. Okay? Now let me explain the concept of rest. Here you have to distinguish the strict definition of rest from the associations that you make. Naturally, you make no associations in your mind. The golfer had a phenomenal round. On his third stroke, the ball reached the green and came to rest 3 inches from the cup. I don't think that the ball was relaxing, regaining its strength, releasing the tensions of the day, and so on. The word rest means stop moving, stop acting, stop performing. That's all it means. Of course, when a person stops moving, he's usually regaining his strength. He's not exerting himself. He's not under any strain. So he will regain his strength. But the word rest doesn't mean regain strength. It means stop moving. Or stop performing. So that's what it refers to here. When it says God rested, it means the activity that he was engaged in up until then stopped. There are other connotations, but that's all the strict meaning of the word carries. And that's all, therefore, we should be responsible for. Okay? Now, it says that he blessed the Sabbath day and sanctified it. And this now becomes a gigantic literature. I'll just mention one element to you. The word blessing in Hebrew always refers to increasing something, making something expand, grow. The word blessing never refers to creating something out of nothing. There are many references to this in the Tanakh. The Ramban states this as a principle. If you look at the manna as it fell to the Jews in the wilderness, you will see that the way it fell is this. A portion fell on each day, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and on Friday a double portion fell, and on Shabbos none fell. So the Zohar asks, how can you tell me that Shabbos is blessed when it gets less than every other day? On the contrary, it's deprived. You're talking about blessing Shabbos, you mean it should get an increase. Every other day, Friday gets 1 portion. Friday gets 2 portions. Shabbos gets nothing. Says the Zohar, what the Torah means here is that God made Shabbos into the source of blessing. Not that it received a blessing, but it became a blessing. And the Zohar explains as follows. You do all your physical creative activity during the week in preparation for Shabbos. Come into Shabbos, and there are certain ways that you are supposed to celebrate Shabbos. One of them is feasting. One of them is feasting. Well, feasting isn't the experience of a gourmand. Feasting means you are celebrating the fact that you are close to God. If you use the food that you have on Shabbos to celebrate your closeness to God, that will be a source of blessing for the coming week, that you should be able to provide food for the next Shabbos. And if not. Shabbos is a time of testing. Are you going to treat the physical bounty that God gives you in a spiritual way? If you are, then it will be a source of blessing for the next week, that this physical bounty should be increased. And if not. And that's what this verse means. That's what the Zohar explains. We Hasidim, maybe some Sfardim also, poor Ashkenazim don't do these things. There's a certain section of the Zohar that we say before Kiddush Friday night. And it starts with this very, I would say almost Talmudic attitude. The verse says this, and the actual performance in the wilderness was this. It don't fit. So how are you going to answer it? And it gives argument, and then it draws conclusions and applications. If you associate the Zohar with unintelligible mysticism, not all of it is like that. This piece is pretty straightforward. Okay, this is an introduction to some of the elements in the 10 pronouncements of Sinai.